Good morning, everybody. Today I'm going to cover lesson 2, which is still pretty much an introductory lesson. And it's covering various ways of selecting objects and aligning them and understanding the paths that make up the shapes that you will be working with, which are comprised of anchor points and how you can select them individually and manipulate them into shapes that you want. So this is the start file for lesson 2. We have as this little wildlife poster for protecting wildlife. We have here the finished version. So you can see we have the bamboo that's comprised of the parts that we saw just a moment ago. That's been put together. We have little pupils for the eyes, and we have the body that has been changed. Not a whole lot to do in this lesson, but I'm going to go ahead and go over all the different ways that you can select an object. So what you start with is your selection tool. That's the black arrow tool in the upper left-hand corner. And if you have an object with a fill, then you just simply click inside it and fill it. And then if I click on this one, it then switches to that object. Okay. So the question might be, well, what if you want both of these objects selected? There are a whole bunch of different ways of doing that. I can select the first one, hold down the Shift key, and select the next one. That's one way of doing it. And I probably will forget some of them. That will come to me later. You can also click and drag around all of them. That would be another way. I can select, as I showed you the other day, I can show you the eyedropper tool. So if I come back over here to the left, let me see, where's my eyedropper? Oh, no, I don't want the eyedropper tool. I want instead, I'm going to go ahead and I need to change this a little bit. I want Reset Essentials Classic. Make sure that this is all over here. Okay, I want instead, I'm going to use the magic wand. So if you recall, one of the ways of doing this from the other day is that if I double click on this, I can base magic wand on fill color, stroke color as well, stroke weight, opacity, and blending modes. So I'm going to select fill color and stroke to demonstrate a point. So if I click on this one, notice that both are selected. They have both the same fill and the same stroke, meaning there is no stroke. Okay, so now if I come off here and I deselect, and let's take one of these, and I'm going to switch the stroke. I'll come over here to the right, my properties panel, and I'll make the stroke black. Just, okay, 1 point. Well, so you can see it a little better, maybe 2-point stroke. Okay, so they have the same fill color, but this one has a stroke of black, this one has none. So again, if I come back with the magic wand and I click on this one, surprisingly, both of them selected. So it should have only selected this one, and I'm not sure why that is. So I'm going to go back in here again. I'm going to make this stroke color no tolerance. And let's try that again. So let's deselect. And I will use it again and see if this makes me a liar. No, it selected both. So it's using the stroke, they have the stroke and the fill. In the past, one of the things that if you wanted to do this, oh, I know which one I'm thinking of. Never mind. Let's go ahead and I'm going to take the stroke off of this one. Well, I'll just leave it. Was the eyedropper tool, because that would be another way to select objects. So the same stroke, the same fill color. So if I come down here to the eyedropper tool, that's the knife tool. There it is down here. If I double click on it, we come up with all the various appearances, okay? So likewise, I can select, if I only want the color and on the stroke color, and you can also determine the weight and that sort of thing, that will do the same thing, okay? So that's that. I'm going to take this one and I'm going to return this back to, as I said, no stroke. There we go. Okay. So another way to select these is in some instances, you may want to group them together. So what I could also do is I can, before I group them, let's use the lasso tool, because that's another way of selecting objects. If I click and I drag around these objects, that will also select them. Now, if I click off of that and I click around all of these, notice that it's selecting the leaves as well. So the lasso tool is another way of selecting objects. And then to deselect them, you just simply click off of them. So I'm going to go back to the selection tool. Another way to select these is to use the layers panel. So if I click here under layers, and I'm going to tear layers off so I don't cover up any of the illustration. Okay, and I twirl down. This gives me a list of everything that we have in our illustration. Okay, and you can see it can be a bit overwhelming. It's sort of daunting in some respects. If I click on the first one here, it will, and I scroll down, you can see that I have, there's a little blue checkbox here next to the one that's selected. If I also want to select the other one, I can also click on that now that that one is selected. And again, if I want both selected, hold down the Shift key, click from here, and both are selected. This way of selecting sometimes will be advantageous when you have objects, a whole slew of objects on an illustration that are adjacent to one another or overlap one another, and it will make it, which will make it difficult to select one object over another. So you may want to use the layers panel to make your selection. Okay, so that's another way of selecting. You can also, when you have objects selected, let me go ahead and make this a little bit smaller again, and I'll just leave this in the lower right-hand corner. If I select this object and I decide, you know what, it's getting in the way of my working on other images, then one of the things that you may want to do is hide the object. And again, that can be done from layers, or we can go to object up here, and we can select hide current selection. And that hides it. And then if you want to bring it back, you can always go to object and you can select show all. Or another way of doing that, since I have my layers panel up here already, if I come down here and I see this, if you just turn it off from here, that hides it as well. So you can turn any object on or off by using the layers panel at any time. I caution you though, this is not like Adobe Photoshop, and that in Photoshop, if you turn off a layer and then you print the file, it will not print that layer because it's been turned off. In Illustrator, it's a very different situation. Just because a layer has been, the visibility of it has been turned off, doesn't mean that it won't print. It will print unless you specify otherwise. When we get to layers, we can talk about that. So that all of these are done basically with the selection tool. So within that, if we look at this in outline form, so if I hit Command Y, now if I click inside that, it doesn't recognize the fill, so I can't select that shape. In order to do that, you have to click on the path itself, and now it is selected. And then again, you click outside it and off it to deselect it. It's also a good way of seeing what anchor points comprise the shape itself. Now we have the bounding box here, which sort of gets in the way. So what I can do is I can go to View, and I can say hide bounding box, which is right here. And that hides that, so I can see just the anchor points that comprise this circle. And there are 4 anchor points, and each are curved points. Now, one of the things that you can do is that you can select an individual anchor point, but to do that, or multiple anchor points, and to do that, you need to use the direct selection tool. That is the white arrow tool right here. So now, as I hover over the path, you'll see that where there is an anchor point, it highlights. So I'm going to go ahead and select the top one. And when you do that, you'll notice that this anchor point also affects the path to the right midway and to the left halfway. And you can see that there are these other 2 anchor points down here that are not highlighted. They're highlighted, and you can tell when they're highlighted when they're darkened by the layer color. Now I can take this anchor point and I can move it like so, and totally reconfigure my shape. And again, you can do this and edit this to your heart's content. I'm going to go ahead and deselect that, and I'm also going to hold down the Shift key. I'm going to select this anchor point as well. So now if I want, on both of these shapes, if I want to move the anchor points in unison, I can do so. Okay, so that allows you to select multiple anchor points on different shapes and move them about. So that can be really a useful tool. Okay. You don't need to be in outline mode to do this. If I hit Command Y again and I bring the shapes back, you can see that they are highlighted. And anytime you want to bring the bounding box back, we can go back to View, and I can come down here to find the bounding box if I can find it. There's a whole bunch of them here. So I'm going to go ahead and show bounding box right here, and that brings that back. Okay. There's the bounding box for both of those. And if I just deselect and I want to undo, it brings it back to my original shapes. Okie doke. So the next point, when you're working with groups, as I said, if I select both of these objects, I can group them together so that they behave as a single object. And you can have 2, 3, hundreds of objects that are grouped together in single, and you can have groups nested in groups if you wish. So for example, let's work with one group first. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to group these 2 circles together. And to do that, I can go under Object and I can select Group or hit Command G. Now this is the group. It doesn't look any different, but when I go back with the selection tool and I select one, they're both selected now. So now they both behave as a single unit. Okay. And if I choose to hold down the Shift key and I want to enlarge them, notice that they both enlarge, or if I shrink them back down, the same thing, they both work in tandem with one another. So the next question is, and very often when you create illustrations, there will be components of that illustration that you feel work as a group together, that you'll want to group, that behave better as a selected collectively rather than individually. But you may want to go in and edit one of those elements later on. And rather than ungroup them and risk the possibility of not grouping them all back together again, there are at least two different ways of selecting within that group. So to do that, we can go to the group selection tool, which is underneath the direct selection tool. That's the little white arrow with a plus sign here. And now I can click on that and notice that it selects individually. I can also use the direct selection tool. When I select that, that will allow me to select very often too the single object within it. But notice that with that direct selection tool, it's not allowing me to, there we go. When I select an individual anchor point, it allows me to edit it separately from the other in the group. So when I go back now with my selection tool and I select one object, still they are both selected. They're part of that group. So now another way of editing that group, I'm going to go ahead and undo that, go back, would be to use the direct selection tool, but to double click on the group. So I double click, and you'll notice that everything else on both artboards is grayed out. And the only thing left now that is visible in its original form are the two objects that are part of that group. And now I can go back in here and I can edit them separately. In order to get out of this edit mode, you'll notice up here in the upper left-hand corner that it shows me I am within a group. If we look inside the layers panel, you can see that these two objects are contained within a group. But to get out of that, this edit mode or isolation mode, I have to go all the way back here. Now I'm back to layer 1 and I click again and I'm back to my original form. Okay, so I'm going to undo. Let's see. There we go. So if I click one again, they're both a group. So this is a group. What if I wanted to make these leaves part of this group as well? There's a couple of ways to do that. I could actually take the leaves and drag them into the group itself, so it's a part of it. Or if I want it to be kind of a subgroup of this group, I can select all of these objects by selecting that, by selecting the first group, holding down the second group, and then grouping them together as well with a Command G. So now if I select even one of these, notice everything is selected. And if I wanted to edit the sphere, the circles again, I would have to double click. You can see that I'm within a group. And you'll notice that it's actually going to the leaves first. So if I double click again, and I double click again, now I'm inside that group. So you can see I have individual paths selected within a group, and this group is now nested within another group. So if you allow it, depending on what kind of illustration you're building, this can get really quite complicated. Okie doke. So next thing, we're going to go ahead, and since the illustration that we're making is like taking little cutout, it's like creating a collage. You're taking out little, cuts of construction paper, pieces of construction paper, and cutting out the shapes and organizing and gluing them all together. It's really fundamentally what Illustrator is like. So one of the things that we want to do is I'm going to go ahead and start putting this illustration together. And one of the things that I want to do is you'll notice that we have all the pieces of the bamboo over here that we have all the parts, but they need to be organized. And there are, crude ways of doing this, and there are very efficient ways of doing this. So I could take each one of these elements and I could drag them together and I could put them together, but that would take a little bit of time. And it would also, not only would it take a bit of time, but it may not be as accurate as I would like it to be. So to do this efficiently, we're going to use the Align tool for this. And the Align can be found over in the Properties panel, or we can find it up here when we select them all. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click and drag make sure that all of these elements of this are selected. And now you'll notice that we have the Align properties here, and the distribute properties, as well as over here as well. So if I click here, we can see all of the various align properties that I have. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to make sure that they're all aligned vertically. The tool that I would want to use would be this one right here. It says horizontal. Actually, it's a horizontal. So horizontal align center. So if I do that, notice that they're all perfectly aligned now. But what I need to do is I need to distribute them so that there is no space between them. And to do that, I can click right here. Okay, now they're evenly distributed, but I also have options here as well. So I could align to or distribute to a key object, which is something that we will do in a minute. I can also specify, let's go ahead and undo that. To bring that back. I want to, let's go ahead again. Let's bring this down. So I want to change the distribute spacing here. So if I click over here, let's go ahead and, come on. I'm going to undo this a little bit. Let's go back again. I had this working so beautifully yesterday. What can I say? There we go. So I'm going to go ahead and align this to the center. And then what I want to do is I want to distribute the spacing. And why am I not getting options down here? So align to selection. Let's do a key object. So we'll do a key object instead. So I don't want any spacing next to these. So I'm going to go ahead and select this is the key object. Okay. And I'll go ahead and I'll bring that back open again. So I want 0. And I'm going to go ahead and click here. And notice how they fit all snugly together really nicely. So in just a couple of clicks, I've gotten them perfectly aligned and perfectly distributed. Now I can take them over to my, my finished illustration on a separate artboard. So I'm going to go ahead and hold down the space bar and move this over. And I'm going to click and drag. And look at it, only took one object over. So that would be a good reason for grouping everything. You see these rather than separate elements, we see them now as kind of a gestalt, a whole, as a whole in their entirety. So Command G to group them. So now I can drag it over. And I'll move this up here like so. And now I'm going to go ahead and zoom out just a little bit so that I can enlarge this to fit so that the other elements fit. So I'm going to go ahead and hold down the Shift key so that what it does is it creates an enlarged or reduced object, but it maintains the original proportions, like so. So there we go. Now we have or bamboo. It took just a couple of seconds to create. Okay, perfectly done. So the align tool can be really useful. Likewise, what we want to do is we want to take this body type here and we want to align it. Because notice that the bottom part is not fitting nicely. So maybe I want to align this. We can align this to objects, or we can align this to the artboard itself. So what I want to do is I'm going to select the individual points using the direct selection tool. So I'm going to deselect that, and I'm going to come over here and I'm going to select the first one, hold down the Shift key and select the second anchor point. And now I want to use the align tool again. So I'm going to select align. okay? And actually, I'm going to bring up the Align panel. I think that might help me a little bit. So I'm going to go to Window. Again, there's a whole bunch of different ways of doing this. Come on. There's the Align panel. There we go. And if I look down here at the bottom, you can see that we're aligning to the selection, or we can align to the artboard itself. I'm going to go ahead and start with the selection. But if I click here, let's go ahead. Let me select both again. Okay. So now if I hold down the Shift key and I click again, no, let me go ahead and align this to the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and select. So I click here and notice what it did, because based on the order of my selection, it brought this one up. If I wanted to bring this one down, I could do that. So let's do that again. Okay. So I'm going to select this one first. I forgot the order that I did it. So let's do this again. First, second, and now we'll go ahead and we'll align to the bottom. And notice that way it brings it down. If you do it in the reverse order, it brings the other one back up. Now this is to the object. And if I want, I can drag this down. Or what I can do is I can align this to the artboard itself. So what I could do is, let's undo this again. Whoops, let's bring this back over. Both of these are selected. And instead of the, let's go ahead and align to the artboard. Now let's go ahead and click again and see what happens. No, see, it's doing it up. And that's not what I want to do, because that was, maybe I had them all selected. I did, I had all the points selected, not just the two. So I'll select that one first, select this one. And now let's go ahead and align to make sure that we have aligned to artboard. And let's go ahead and select bottom. And now notice how both of those points were moved to fit to the bottom of the artboard perfectly, perfectly aligned. Very, very nice. So that's another way for us to work. Okay. So the Align tool, I think, you know, this assignment is about selecting objects, but really, I think more importantly, what will really reduce your workload and increase your efficiency will be to use Align very often. And again, you can align to individual objects, or you can align to the artboard itself. But for example, let me go ahead and I'm going to take one of these and I'm going to make a copy of it. Okay. And then I'm going to make another copy just to show you. And I'm going to go ahead and hit Command D to duplicate. So I have all of these and they're evenly distributed, but if I select them all, you can see if we go ahead and we use the Align tool, and if you mess up, you can always just hit Command Z. But look what happens when I hit Align to the left. So that's what they're doing, and it's based on the artboard selection. So that's why it's done that, why it's doing that, because that's what I hit the last time. So I'm going to undo that. Come on. Command Z, there we go, bring it back. And I'm going to make sure that this is aligned to selection. Okay. Now, if I want it aligned to a key object, then within that selection group, notice that this is highlighted a little bit differently. So now if I go ahead and I want these all aligned to the top of this object, if I clicked this one right here, notice that they're all aligned to that. And then the next one would be, if I click down here, how do you want this to be distributed? So again, it can be distributed to the object, or maybe I want to this key object, I want them each to be 1/4 of an inch apart. So if I put 0.25 inches, 0.25, and I click the distribution here, notice that they're all perfectly distributed, 1/4 of an inch apart. That makes it so much easier, even if you were using a grid and snapping to a grid and things like that. This makes sure, again, you work more quickly and more efficiently and more accurately by using this tool. So next thing I want to do is I want to select not all of these. These are all part of the same group. So now I need to go inside that group. You got to be careful. Hold on here. There we go. I'm working a little slowly here. So let me zoom back in. Let's see, I have another, I need to pause for a second here. See my participants. Oh, okay, Marcella is here. Okie doke. What I want to do now is I need to go back inside this group. So I'm going to double click to get inside here. Get inside this group. And now I can get rid of these because I don't need them for the rest of my. Let me get back out of here. And let me ungroup. So I'm going to go to Object. Oh, come on. Let me get out of here. I'm going to just keep ungrouping these. So that's another thing you have to consider too, that when you are outside of these and you decide, wait a minute, I don't want these a part of a group anymore, that you have to do that. So I'm going to get out of here. Let's go ahead and select this again. And let's go to Object Ungroup, which is Shift Command, should be Shift Command G. And I'll do this again. I'm going to Object Ungroup again. Select, let's try this again now. So these all should be separate objects now. There we go. So I've ungrouped them enough times so that they're all separate groups. There we go. I'm going to stop my recording for a second. Pause. I'm getting these. Okay, so I've continued the recording. And one of the last things that we want to do now is to put the zooming out, because I have so many things going right here on my laptop. Everything is going at a snail's pace. A lot of lag time between these things. Jeez Louise. Q&A question? No, thanks. Okay. So once again, let me go ahead and put the irises over there for the pupils. Now there's a variety of ways that we can do this. And if we do it the way the textbook tells us to do that, then we just layer these objects one on top of another. So I'm going to hold down the space bar and move this over like so. And I'm going to take one of these objects and I can group them together and I can pull this over like so. Okay. And you'll notice that it's covering it up. Why is that? Because of the layered. And you can see in here in my layers panel that here is the iris, but the pupils are down here. So there's a couple of different ways that I can rearrange these. And one way of doing that would be to use command, let's see, command right bracket. That actually moved it up. So I don't want to do that. I want to move it down. So I'm going to use command left bracket. And if I do that again, now it's below it. So I'm in good shape. So there, I've done that. If I want to make a copy of this rather than use the second one that they provided for us, I could go ahead and click and drag, hold down the Option key and bring it over. Hold down the Shift key and it will align it horizontally. Whoops, I didn't do that right. So let's try that again. Let's click and drag it over. Hold down. No, wrong one. There we go. There we go. Click and drag, hold down the Option key, Shift key, make a copy of it and drag it over and let's see if it's in the right position, in the right order. And it is, so we're in good shape. So both of the pupils are above the irises here. Now, there's another way that we can work with this that I don't believe the book has touched on just yet. And we talked the other day about different drawing modes that by default we're in normal mode, but you can say draw behind. One of the things that we can do is we can draw inside. So I'm going to select both of these objects. Come on. That one, hold down the Shift key, select that one as well. Come on. Okay, then this is what I was talking about, when you're having difficulty selecting some of these, then what you might want to do is hold down the Shift key and then click from here. And then hold down the Shift key and click from here. And then hold down the Shift key and click from here. So now we have both of those. I don't want this one. I want this one. There we go. So now I'm going to drag these over and I'm going to hold down the Option key and I'm going to make a copy of this. So let me go ahead and zoom in, show you what I'm doing here. Is that right now these objects are directly on top of one another, and that's okay. But what if you wanted to do something a little bit clever with this? You wanted to give the bear cross eyes or some strange thing. So I'm going to select each one of these and move these down. Like so. Now what I want to do is I'm going to select this object, and what I want to do is I want to be able to draw inside it. So to do that, what I need to do is I need to come down here. These are our drawing modes, and it's a very tiny little icon. And I'm going to say draw inside. You have to make sure that the object is selected first. And you'll notice that it changes from the bounding box to this little broken line box here. So now I can take this object and I can copy it. And with this one selected, I can go edit, paste inside. Now it's inside that. How do I know it's inside that? Because watch what happens when I move this over. Notice how it's clipped inside that circle. Okay, so I could do the same with this one. We can go ahead and give them kind of googly eyes. So I'll take this one and I will take, and you have to do it with each individual object. Again, I'll take the drawing mode again, and I'm going to select draw inside. Let me go ahead and draw. Let me switch back to normal for a second. Now let's go back again with that one selected and say draw inside, because it will draw inside the other one if I'm not careful. So I'm going to draw inside this one. Now I'll take this one, and again, I'll copy it, or you can cut it, you know, if you don't need it again. I like having extra shapes for backup. And I'm going to go ahead and edit, paste. If I say paste in place, it's going to paste it where it was originally. So I'm just going to select, go ahead and paste, and it pastes inside that object. Now I can go ahead and move it up like so. So now I have my little guy with these kind of googly eyes. Now I'm going to select draw normal so that I go back to my normal mode again. And if I want to, I could replace these. So I'm going to go ahead and select each of these. I'll just go ahead and move these over like so. Then I'll take these. Come on, come on. Allow me to select. Why won't you allow me to select? There we go. Now I'll go ahead and I'll just shift click, select this one as well. Now I'm going to go ahead and move these over. Damn. This is really giving me fits. I might be running out of, let me see here. No, making sure I have plenty of batteries, that sort of thing. Let's move this over. There we go. Move this in place. So now I've added a little bit of levity to this. Okay. So that's the, being able to draw inside a shape. And then I guess that one of the last things that they wanted us to do is to take the leaves over here. So let's take these leaves. And they are not part of a group. So I'm going to go ahead and select both of them. And I'm going to make them a group. And once I do, again, you'll notice inside the layers panel, it will name it group. And if I want to, I can rename that and just name it leaves. So you can always name your groups. And before you know it, I mean, even though this is a very simple illustration, this can get quite complex and it will be difficult to distinguish one shape from another after a while, before you know it. So it might behoove you to, as you go, make sure that you have your layer panel up and begin to layer, to name your objects and to layer, to name your groups, your subgroups, and that sort of thing. So that's pretty much it for today. Couple of little glitches here, but for the most part, showing you different ways of selecting objects, grouping objects, selecting individual anchor points or multiple anchor points, using the align tools and distribute tools, which are a part of the align tools, to make your job go a little bit quicker and more efficiently and more accurately. So that's pretty much it for today. That's all I wanted to do. Next week, we'll be covering probably 2 or 3 more lessons. The end of next week, your first assignment will be due, which is the mask assignment. So you might want to be thinking about that and doing some research over the weekend. This recording will be posted in about an hour or so on YouTube. And then that will be it for us this week. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to email me. That's at kirkmillerart@gmail.com. Make sure that you email me anyway to make sure that you've been added to our Google Drive folder or shared Google Drive folder so that I can communicate with you that way as well, and also grade your project. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.